The history of electric forces and fields. The word electric comes from the Greek word for amber, which means electron. So rub amber with wool and it will pick up bits of wood, feather, and straw. Comes from the tales of Miletus in 1640. About 1736, Charles Francois de Frey learned that rubbing the glass and rubbing substances, for example amber, seemed to produce charges of different kinds. He found that two charges of the same kind repelled each other, while two of unlike kinds attracted. He suggested electricity might exist between two distinctly different types, which he named vitreous and resinous electricity. William Watson suggested in 1746 that electricity was one fluid. One of the two kinds of electricity proposed by Dufray could be an excess of positive of this fluid and the other a deficiency or negative. Flow from positive to negative could account for electrical discharge. Benjamin Franklin later adopted and popularized Watson's one fluid theory and chose vitreous electricity to be the positive type, giving the electrons the negative type. Franklin's great reputation won universal acceptance for this view. Charging experiments number 1. So, rods that have not been rubbed, there's a plastic rod and a plastic rod. The rods that have not been rubbed, when you bring them closer to each other, nothing happens. Number 2, rods are now rubbed with wool and then they are brought closer to each other. It is observed that they will move away from each other. Glass rod rubbed with silk attracts a plastic rod rubbed with wool, as you can see in this situation. At increased distances, forces become smaller, forces of attraction as well as forces of repulsion. Charging experiment number 2. A charged plastic rod rubbed with wool attracts small pieces of paper. A charged plastic rod rubbed with wool is attracted to an unrubbed neutral plastic rod. A plastic rod rubbed with wool is attracted to wool and repelled by silk. A charged or rubbed object attracts both the charged plastic rod and the charged glass rod, as is the case here. The third kinds of charging experiments that were done were of this kind. So a charge from a plastic rod rubbed with wool can be transferred to a metal sphere. After the transfer, the plastic rod does not attract any paper anymore. A second metal sphere connected by a rod acquires the rod's charge. The second metal sphere connected by a plastic rod does not acquire rod's charge. So these were all the charging experiments that people were doing over time. They did not quite have names for them yet, but these were all the things that we are going to be talking about in further movies.